Welcome to another episode of Bitfinex Talks. I'm your host, Ricardo Martinez. Today, I'm here with Federico Tenga. He's the Research and Development Strategist at Bitfinex. Federico, how are you? Thanks for joining the show.
Very good. Thank you for the invitation.
Awesome. I'm happy to have you here. Federico, you work on RGB for Bitfinex. RGB is a tokenization project over Lightning on Bitcoin. Can you kind of give us a rundown on what exactly it is you're doing with RGB?
Sure. First of all, RGB, yeah, as you said, is like a new protocol to enable tokenization on top of Bitcoin. So what is the goal? We already have a way to tokenize assets on top of blockchains. But yeah, most of the tokenization happens on top of the Ethereum blockchain or other blockchains, which they, of course, issuing assets on top of Ethereum, then you have to deal with all the trade-offs of Ethereum, or in case of other blockchain, the other trade-offs that they involve in terms of security, decentralization, and stability of the network. So the goal is to enable to issue tokens and assets directly on top of Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is the most secure, most decentralized blockchain. And also, there are scalability solutions that are being developed on top of Bitcoin, such as the Lightning Network that is already reached a significant level of adoption. And if we can leverage those technology, not only for Bitcoin but also for other kind of assets, it can be like a game changer for a lot of use cases. So RGB is trying to accomplish the possibility to issue assets on top of Bitcoin, but in a scalable way, without using too much space on the blockchain, so minimizing the so-called on-chain footprint, and being aware of the privacy, so trying to maximize the privacy of the users, and being compatible with the Lightning Network, so we can exchange assets with the same scalability advantages that the Lightning Network can offer. So yeah, with our team, basically, RGB is it's an ecosystem effort. It's not only Bitfinex that is working on it, also the other companies. And with the team that we have in Bitfinex, we are trying to contribute to the protocol, build tools for developers to help them build on top of RGB, and develop our own application as well, such as an Android wallet that we recently released called the Iris Wallet, that is a wallet for Android that supports the issuance and transfers of RGB assets from Bitcoin.
Would you say that RGB is a layer 2 protocol like Lightning, or would you consider it more of like a layer 3 protocol?
Okay, yeah, no, yeah, I will consider, upper layer for sure. Whether it's 2 or 3, it's hard to say, because RGB is on top of Bitcoin because it's on top of the Bitcoin blockchain. So yeah, we can consider it a layer 2, but it can also be on top of Lightning. But Lightning is already a layer 2, so does it become a layer 3? So I think it's trying to classify layer 2, 3, 4. It's always tricky. So yeah, I consider it an upper layer protocol. Whether it's 2 or 3, I'm not sure, but yeah, for sure it's over Bitcoin.
There's a few different efforts right now to kind of do tokenization on Bitcoin. RGB is one of them, Taro is another one, and then Synonym is also doing something similar. How is RGB different from Taro and Synonym?
Well, okay, comparing to Taro, it's easier because they're very similar. So yeah, basically Taro has a very similar design to RGB. Yes, not identical. So from the specification, there are a few differences that I see as disadvantages for Taro. I mean, people from Taro may disagree, but the way I see, I mean, it's a bit technical. But just to give an overview, I feel that the way Taro and the transactions is a little bit less of privacy and a little bit less of scalability. But not significantly. So I mean, I think so they're still very similar protocols. So I think RGB and Taro, the real difference will be more in the implementation point of view. So RGB is a bit ahead in development. There is already a wallet that you can use to test RGB, which is our wallet, Iris Wallet, while Taro doesn't have that yet. So yeah, overall the two protocols are quite similar in the design. So probably, yeah, they will diverge more significantly in the implementation, but yeah, we still have to see like a Taro implementation. RGB, yeah, we have a release that is not final yet, so like it's working, but is also like in phase of upgrading itself. So yeah, I think like over the years we will see those two protocols diverge more significantly. Regarding what Synonym is doing, first of all, yeah, it's not that I am like a huge expert of peer credits, which is the protocol they're working on. But yeah, from my understanding, the main difference is that it's not built on top of Bitcoin at all. Is built on top of basically on the assumption that centralized issuers, I mean that most assets have a centralized issuer. So it's okay also to have some level of centralization in the transfer of assets. And so it doesn't even attempt to be built on top of Bitcoin. It's just like a completely separate technology that, yeah, was on this assumption that centralization is acceptable because anyway, the issuers are centralized, which is, yeah, something that we can agree with. But I mean, depends. I think there are also like a situation where you want to maximize the centralization of security, and then like something built on top of Bitcoin as an advantage there.
As far as Taro and RGB go, you mentioned that the protocols may be diverging in the future. Will there be any cross compatibility? Like, will you be able to send an RGB token to a Taro wallet when they come out with a wallet? Are there plans for that, or are they going to be completely separate?
No, they're very likely to be completely separate. I mean, there is also because, yeah, the design of the protocol can be similar, but then if the implementation is different, it's very hard to create interoperability. So no, by default, it will be possible to move a RGB asset towards Taro or the other way around. But yeah, you can still build bridges. And yeah, being a protocol on the same blockchain, it will be much easier to build a bridge between RGB and Taro compared to like between Bitcoin and Ethereum, because I mean they're on the same blockchain, so it's easier to build a bridge that works with minimized trust or like with less complexity in general. So yeah, I expect like if both protocols will be widely adopted and successful, probably at some point people will build bridges that like I can send you like an RGB token and it's automatically swapped towards a Taro token or the other way around.
Can you talk a little bit more about the Iris wallet? Is it only testnet right now? What can you do with it that you can't do with a normal Bitcoin wallet?
Yeah, so currently, yeah, so we released the Iris wallet at the end of October. Initially, we released it both in testnet version and mainnet version, but then we decided to unpublish the mainnet version from the store because I mean we understood that the wallet is still like still very experimental, so it's okay to have a few users that start using it also with real money to get better feedback, but not too many of them because we don't want to run like a customer support to have a customer support team to take care of a lot of customers that are playing with what is still an experimental wallet. So yeah, like it's been released also mainnet, but we have like very few users that actually able to mainnet. So yeah, right now it's available only on testnet for people that want to download it, and only for Android. So what you can do that you cannot do with a normal Bitcoin wallet. So first of all, it's also a normal Bitcoin wallet. So you can also like receive Bitcoin, send Bitcoin, like as you do with your normal Bitcoin wallet. But on top of that, you also have the ability to issue RGB assets, send RGB assets, and receive RGB assets. So there is in the menu you have this button to create new assets, or then you can generate an invoice to receive new assets or try to send new assets to users. And yeah, so for now it's pretty much that. We also have a faucet feature that user can request a collectible token just to try the experience of receiving an asset if they don't have anyone else to play with. And for now, yeah, it's mostly an experimental playground to play with the technology, to have a feeling of how it works, and for us as developers to get feedbacks from the users. But we are like keeping evolving the application. So like every couple of weeks we do a new release that add some new feature that stabilize the application a little bit. And yeah, the goal is then while at the same time also RGB itself, the protocol is having some refactoring to improve it and to make it more stable and secure. The goal is that in Q1 2023, we will be able to start moving forward with the actually mainnet use cases and we will have a Iris wallet that in the time has evolved to become like a more stable and with more and I'm pretty sure also that offers more features to the users, and yeah, we will be able to finally start getting like token and assets economy on top of Bitcoin with RGB.
You said something very interesting right there about RGB assets and collectible assets. What kind of assets will people be able to issue on RGB?
Yeah, so like by design, the RGB protocol is actually very flexible. So it's possible to create your own issuance contract that may fit different kind of use cases. What has been developed so far is two kind of assets. The what we call fungible assets, which are like yeah, basically what we generally understood as like normal token, like the ERC20 on Ethereum. So asset that yeah, that can be used for stablecoin or like security tokens or like credits, voucher, whatever. And yeah, so assets that have like a certain amount and can be transferred between users. Then we create a second category that is called the collectibles, collectible tokens, which basically the only significant difference so far is that they have a media file attached. So usually, and this is like the use cases for like NFT or more generically to yeah, collectible like with digital art and stuff like this. So the difference is that, for example, when you buy an NFT on Ethereum, basically you buy a token that has a link to a JPEG or whatever that is hosted somewhere else, typically on IPFS. And the thing is that like there is yeah, like basically you're buying something, but the media file that is attached to it is hosted somewhere else. So with RGB, basically collectible tokens, the media file is passed from the sender to the receiver together with the token itself and is stored on the local device of the user. So this in a way creates enables to have like in a way better ownership of the digital art. I mean, you're not relying on a third party to actually store it for you, and also we can have private media files. Like it doesn't need to be like digital art; can be also something else, but it can be private because it's shared only between the sender and the receiver. It's not hosted on a public resources accessible to everyone. So yeah, this is like a difference that yeah, maybe some issuers of digital art or other kind of collectible may appreciate.
How does RGB differ from something like Liquid, where we see people issuing security tokens, and also like Rare Toshi, they have NFTs on Liquid? What are the differences between Liquid's model and the RGB model?
Oh, well, the main difference is the RGB is built directly on top of the Bitcoin blockchain without any like trust trade-off, while Liquid is a sidechain. Is a sidechain run by a federation. So like you need to put some trust in the federation every time you're using Liquid. So yeah, for example, the federation could censor transaction or could block your ability to redeem the Bitcoin that you have on Liquid towards the main chain, and yeah, and you need those Bitcoin to pay for transaction fees on Liquid. While RGB is directly on top of Bitcoin, so there is no federation involved, so there is no risk that the trust that you put in the federation may not be like well used by the federation, and so there is no counterparty risk at all. And basically, you have the same security and trust assumption that you have when you use normal Bitcoins.
You mentioned privacy on RGB several times. What kind of privacy improvements can users expect from using RGB?
Yeah, so basically there are a few multiple privacy features that have been implemented on top of RGB. So the first one is that on the blockchain, we don't put any data that can help to identify the content of the transaction. So on the blockchain, we just put the hash, the commitment of the actual RGB transfer. So a blockchain observer, when he sees a Bitcoin transaction that contains an RGB transfer, it only sees a normal Bitcoin transaction. It cannot even tell that that one is an RGB transaction. And even if using some heuristic is able to identify that transaction as an RGB transaction, it's not able to understand the content of it. It doesn't see with the sender, with the receiver, and how many assets and which assets are being transferred. So first of all, on the blockchain, there is no information at all that can be used to de-anonymize or like to reduce the privacy of the user. Secondly, and basically how it works, that all the data of the RGB transfer, instead of being pushed on top of the blockchain, they are moved between the sender and the receiver on a private direct communication channel. So only the parties involved in the transfer are aware that the transfer even exists. Everyone else doesn't even know that it exists, and they're not interested in it. And so it's good both for privacy, but also for scalability, because it means that our wallet only looks at the stuff that is relevant for us. It doesn't look at other people's stuff. So it needs more resources to run. So yeah, this is the first and main privacy feature. The second one is that basically RGB transfers are sent, the ownership of an asset is moved towards a Bitcoin output. So basically, when I send you money, I ask you, okay, can you give me a Bitcoin output of your wallet? You give it to me, and I send those assets to that Bitcoin output. But in reality, I do not even know to which Bitcoin output I'm sending and those assets, because when you show to me your Bitcoin output where I can send the assets, you show me to me in a obfuscated way. We call it like blended output, because basically it's the output plus some randomness, so I'm not able to identify which output specifically it is. So when I'm paying you, I don't know where the money is going exactly. So I'm not able to monitor when you will spend those money in the future, which is, for example, what happens with Bitcoin. When I send you Bitcoins, even if you share with me a new fresh address that has no Bitcoin on it, so I can see the total balance of your wallet, I'm still able to see when you will spend those Bitcoins in the future, because I can monitor those assets. I can say, okay, take this Bitcoin, but don't waste them all on partying on the weekend. Then I see that Saturday night you're spending all the Bitcoin, and I understand what you're doing. So like in a way, I can like violate your privacy. With RGB, I just send you the assets, and I have no idea where the asset went exactly. So I cannot have any information about your future financial activity. And yeah, this is another second important feature. And the third one is that basically, when you receive an RGB asset, you need to validate all the history of the asset, from the creation of the asset to the last transaction. So you're sure that the asset is real, nobody did any double spending, there is no hidden inflation, and everything is regular. To do this, actually, so you need to see all the transaction of the previous owner of the asset. So to improve the privacy on the side, has been implemented a protocol developed by Blockstream that is called the Bulletproof, that basically enables to hide the amount of each transfer. So I can see the history of the transfer, but I don't see how many tokens are involved in each specific transfer. I can only validate that each transfer didn't didn't spend more than it was owned by the sender. So there is the amount in the output is not bigger than the amount in the input, but I don't know exactly how big this amount is. So yeah, I can validate past history without having to see too much about the financial activity of previous owner. So this is another privacy feature. So yeah, overall, like the privacy of RGB is very good, and yeah, is much better than most crypto payments that we have right now.
Is RGB, the project started before the Taproot soft fork, but is RGB leveraging Taproot and like the signature aggregation in order to accomplish all this?
Yeah, so like initially, first design of RGB, it involved a technique to put the commitment of the RGB transaction inside the Bitcoin transaction that will involve basically putting the commitment inside the public key, a public key of the output of the transaction, which is called like a key tweaking, which is actually the same technique that is used by Taproot. So when Taproot came out, it was decided to just migrate to Taproot directly, which leveraged the same key tweaking mechanism, but at least like in a way that is more standardized and more adopted by wallets. So it makes it a bit easier for wallets to integrate RGB, because they just need to be able to use Taproot to do it instead of some new custom kind of code. But RGB also like to further make life easier for wallet developers. It also support a second kind of commitment, which use like simple op-return outputs, which are basically output where you can just put like a short string of data instead of an output of a Bitcoin transaction. And yeah, it's like a bit less elegant because you put more data on the blockchain, so you put extra bytes on the blockchain. But it's much easier for wallets to integrate. So at least for the initial phase, it's very useful for the first wallet to start shipping products without having to deal with the extra level of complexity that Taproot involves.
You mentioned that RGB is built on top of Bitcoin, but it also works on top of Lightning. Can you use RGB without Lightning?
Yeah, absolutely. Because like RGB is built on top of Bitcoin, and like Lightning is built on top of Bitcoin. Like basically RGB is built on top of Bitcoin transaction. Those Bitcoin transaction can be transaction that we immediately send on the blockchain, so like normal on chain, or can be transaction that are then replaced inside a Lightning channel update. So basically, Lightning Network basically are Bitcoin transaction. Like it's not something like exotic. It's just Bitcoin transaction, but instead of every time broadcasting them to the blockchain, we replace them with a new one, so we don't have to pay the on-chain fee every time. So RGB basically is an RGB transfer is committed inside of Bitcoin transaction, but we can also put committed inside of a Bitcoin transaction that is not broadcasted to the blockchain immediately, but is later replaced with the mechanism that we replace transaction inside a Lightning channel. So yeah, like it's both on top of Bitcoin and on top of Lightning and on top of any other like scalability solution that in the future may emerge on top of Bitcoin. Because as long as we developed a new scalability solution for Bitcoin, basically RGB can also leverage them because RGB is just on top of Bitcoin transaction. Then if there is some new kind of protocol to use Bitcoin transaction in a more efficient way, RGB can also leverage it.
What haven't I asked you about RGB that you think is important for people to know about?
Well, I think yeah, we covered the main part. Then we could go more into technical details. But yeah, I don't know if I mean it will take some time to explore all of them. But yeah, the main thing is that it's like yeah, protocol on top of Bitcoin without having to trust federation or anything like that. Compatible with the Lightning Network, better privacy for the features that we already talked about, and is very flexible. So yeah, right now we're talking about the main use case for RGB is like simple token issuances. So like to issue like stable coin, security tokens, NFT, collectibles, that kind of stuff. But actually the protocol is quite flexible, and it basically it enables to create your own issuance contract that can also be issuance of something that is not necessarily a token. For example, people talk about using RGB for decentralized identities, or for like proof of publications. So there are like other use cases that can be built on top of RGB. So yeah, like differently, for example, from Taro. Taro is a protocol that is being developed to be very specific for one use case that, from my understanding, is going to be stablecoins. RGB enables that, but also is more flexible, more generalized protocol that in the future can be used to do more stuff. So you have those contracts that can also like encode more complex logic. So yeah, maybe right now it's not so easy to easily like see all the potential future use cases of RGB. So we are trying to focus on the simple one that have a market, that there is like a market demand for right now, which is just like simple assets and token. But the protocol is actually much more generalized, much more powerful. So I expect that in the future we will see other use cases that yeah, maybe like completely unrelated to the token issuance and can enable other stuff that basically leverage Bitcoin as a trustless and immutable ledger where yeah, like it's impossible to double spend a transaction, and so like to change past the data. And this is useful, yeah, it's useful for Bitcoin transaction, useful for token transaction, but it can be useful also for other use cases such as identities, proof of publication, and other stuff that people can come up with in the future.
You mentioned that March Q1 2023, you guys are planning on having the Iris wallet working on mainnet. What can people expect from RGB for 2023?
Yeah, so yeah, we have a lot of plans from 2023. So yeah, first of all, there will be the mainnet release. Then we will work on the Lightning compatibility part, because yeah, now we initially will be only on chain, not on Lightning. Then, like I think, like a first very useful use case that I would like to start working it, and I think like it's absolutely feasible to do it in a reasonable amount of time, is to have decentralized trading of top of Bitcoin. So basically, yeah, the advantage is that yeah, you have RGB assets that are on the Bitcoin blockchain together with Bitcoin, the asset. So it's quite easy. It's much easier compared to when you are dealing with other blockchain like with Liquid, which yeah, it's basically it's a sidechain, a separate blockchain, to have atomic swaps because they are inside the same blockchain. So what we will work on will be to have atomic swaps on top of Bitcoin, between Bitcoin and assets on top of RGB, or also between different kind of assets on RGB. And in this way, you can have like trading without counterparty risk. So like me and you, like we just need to agree on an exchange rate. Then we can construct together a transaction where I send you Bitcoin, you send me like dollar stablecoin or whatever, and we automatically exchange it without having to trust each other, without having to rely on an escrow, and without having to rely on any centralized service. So I think this will be like a very good use case for to create like to build an economy on top of Bitcoin, and to start having like alternatives to centralized services, especially for like people that do not have access to those centralized services for whatever reason.
Federico, thank you so much for coming on the show and answering all my questions about RGB. This was super informative. RGB sounds extremely interesting, and it seems like one of the projects that I need to keep tabs on for the next year.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much. And yeah, like as a call to action for our audience, just like download the Aris wallet on the Play Store if you have Android. Start playing with it and send us feedback and send us your impression about it.
Okay, is it on iOS as well?
No, for now it's only on Android. We wanted to focus on like just like now we're focusing on improving the wallet and delivering new features rather than be on all platforms. So for now it's only Android, and then later on at some point we will also work on the iOS version.
Okay. How can the audience follow the progress of the RGB project? Is there like a website or an online community?
Yeah, there is a online community. There is a Telegram group called RGB Telegram. And also like, yeah, to have like a bunch of resources to learn more about RGB. There is a website that I'm with a list of resources that I'm curating called on rgb.info, that you can find a list of links with all kind of like resources to learn about RGB, but also to play with RGB, to see all the like wallets available or the tools available to start doing stuff with RGB.
Okay. And how can people follow you on social media?
Yeah, on Twitter, it's just my name, Federico Tenga, pretty easy, and yeah, that's where I'm more active.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks again for coming on the show, and I appreciate it.
Thanks for the invitation.